My dear Divyavani viewers, welcome to the Word of God program. We have been reflecting on the events of the book of Exodus. It's a very complicated book with so many events, and yet very briefly I presented to you some of those main ones with the explanations wherever it was needed. In the last talk, I shared with you the Egyptian measure to control the population of the Israelites. They tried to oppress the Israelites with hard work, with extremely hard slavery, but that did not work. And then the Pharaoh asked the midwives to kill all the male children. And 2 midwives were called by the Pharaoh to do this, and still the number did not come down. Finally, the Pharaoh questioned the midwives, and they had their own excuse. What is to be noted in this particular incident is, in a way, Pharaoh is considered God, and an ordinary man has no access to Pharaoh, whereas the midwives have access to Pharaoh, and they give this, though rather lame excuse, and justified the number of children born. This particular situation continues, although rulers do not suppress children because they need workforce, and Ramesses had taken up a major work in Ramesses and Pithom, and therefore he needed labor. But then the Pharaoh actually asked the midwives to reduce the birth of male children. This actually led to the other events that were combined with the birth of Moses. There is a natural propensity to know the birth and the childhood of any leader. In the Bible we have, for example, the infancy narratives of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1 and 2 and in Luke chapter 1 and 2. There is all over the world perhaps this interest that is clear, and somehow they try to get some information about the childhood days, even trying to show that already from the infancy stage the hero was a miraculous person. One simple example is Hercules seems to have strangled a snake in his cradle. There are other Near East narratives, for example, the Akkadian text regarding the legend of Sargon, who later becomes the king. He was actually thrown into the river Euphrates in a basket, and he was taken up by the one who comes to the river to draw water, and was brought up by that man, and so on. The narrative regarding Moses may be influenced by the story or the legend of this type. There is also a story about the adoption of a child that was found, and the child or baby was given to a nurse and paid for keeping the baby for 3 years, and then the child is adopted and trained as a scribe. So similar such stories and legends were popular, and the writer of the book of Exodus perhaps was influenced by such narratives, such legends. The special birth of, for example, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph and Samuel are in the Bible. That also is something that must have influenced the writer of the Exodus. The legendary quality of the story of Moses' childhood, may be further emphasized because in the whole narrative, no actual names are given except the name of Moses, which indicates perhaps this also is a story and not to be taken as historical. We reflected on all these in the last talk, and there are many more actually that are to be considered so that we understand the book of Exodus in the right sense. From here we move to the name of Moses. Moses is given the name Moses, which means is born. It's an Egyptian term, and its meaning is simply is born. Many names of gods will end with Moses. For example, there is Thutmose, which simply means Thut is born, or Ahmose means Ahmose was born. So there is this custom in the Egyptian culture that the name or a suffix with the name with Moses is added, and that is used in order to simply explain the birth of a baby, a child. The Hebrew name of Moses is actually Moshe, and that is derived from the root Masha, which means to draw. Exodus chapter 2 verse 10 explains this meaning, and the baby taken out from water is named Masha, and the daughter of Pharaoh will say, because I drew Masha, I drew him out of the water. So the name Moses has this particular interesting meaning. In the Hebrew, it simply means is born, and the Hebrew name Moshe is also refers to the word to draw, drawing out from water, and that way the name is explained. There is a further evidence for Moses being an Egyptian. He was brought up as an Egyptian, and that background adds to the actual childhood story and his background, Egyptian background. The names of other members of Moses' family are also mostly Egyptian names. Exodus chapter 6:16 has the name Merari. Exodus chapter 6:25 has the name Phinehas. So they are actually Egyptian names. And the daughters of Roel, that is in chapter 2 verse 19 is actually people who knew that Moses was an Egyptian. When they go back home after watering their sheep, their father asks, "How come you came very fast today?" And they have an answer. The answer is this: today an Egyptian helped us to draw water. And he filled the troughs. He also drove away the shepherds who were actually disturbing us. And that is how we happened to come back home fast. And then their father asks the girls, "Why did you not bring him home, give him something to eat?" They did not do that. But then they went and brought him to their house, and he was given food and asked to take rest. We'll have a break. We'll come back after a few minutes. Welcome back. I was narrating to you the events of Exodus, Moses especially, how his birth, how that is narrated, and all the events related to the birth of Moses. The early life of Moses, especially, for example, that he runs away, flees to Midian, is also something interesting. Certainly an event caused all that, and because of that he had to run away. But then that event is an eye-opener. What happened is the question posed by the Hebrew in verse 14 of chapter 2, "Who has appointed you ruler and judge over us?" It is precisely this question of his credentials that Moses will have to face very shortly. He is brought up as an Egyptian. He is not a Hebrew or not known as a Hebrew, though he belongs to the tribe of Levi. But all these have to be really proved so that the people will accept him as a prophet God has sent. The flight to Midian also anticipates a few other things. He flees to the desert, and similarly the people of Israel will head for the desert. Just as Moses encounters God at the mountain in Exodus chapter 3 verse 1, so too the people of Israel will experience God at the mountain. The land of Midian, Moses' present home, is actually a desert area in the Sinai Peninsula. In the later traditions, these desert-dwelling Midianites will become the implacable enemies of Israel. Israel suffered much because of the Midianites. And some of these events are recounted in the book of Numbers and in the book of Judges. Numbers chapter 25 verses 1 to 2 and 6 to 9, I shall read. While Israel was staying in Shittim, the people began to have sexual relations with the women of Moab. They invited the people to the sacrifice of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. Just then one of the Israelites came and brought a Midianite woman into the family in the sight of Moses and in the sight of the whole congregation of the Israelites, while they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he got up, left the congregation. Taking a spear in his hand, he went up to the Israelite man into the tent, pierced the two of them, the Israelite and the woman, through the belly. So the plague was stopped among the people of Israel. Nevertheless, those that died by the plague were 24,000. With this, we can get an idea of what the Midianites were. They came into close relationship with the Israelites, and the Israelites were actually not allowed to have any sexual relationship with other tribes. And in this way, they sinned, and God actually punished them. The Midianites were also putting a lot of trouble for the Israelites. They had to actually hide themselves from the Midianites. The relief came only with the call of Gideon. God called Gideon and asked him to lead the Israelites to defeat the Midianites. And that was a very great turning point for the Israelites. The name royal is actually not a personal name, but name of a tribe. Moses' father-in-law's name is given as royal, but that is only the name of the tribe. And Moses' life in Midian also has other events affecting his credential. For example, the stories of the wells that are all there. The Yahwist is fond of narrating all those things that took place at the well. For example, in Genesis chapter 24, we have the event of Rebekah. Abraham had sent his servant to look for a girl for Isaac. He came to the city of Nahor and prayed, "Let the girl to whom I shall say, 'Please offer your jar that I may drink,' and who shall say, 'Drink, and I will water your camels,' let her be the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac." That is in Genesis 24, 1 to 6. With this, there is a clear indication that all this is happening at the well. There is another incident, the incident of Rachel, that is in Genesis chapter 29, verses 9 to 10. Jacob saw the shepherds of Haran and asked them if they knew Laban, son of Nahor. They replied, "Yes," and said, "His daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep." While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. Now when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of his mother's brother Laban, the sheep of his mother's brother Laban, Jacob went up and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of his mother's brother Laban. All this incident taking place near a well. There is a third one, that is the present one. Now the writer actually introduces Zipporah again at a well. When they returned to their father Reuel, he said to them, "How is it that you returned so soon today?" They answered, "An Egyptian saved us from the interference of the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." "Where is the man?" he asked his daughters. "Why did you leave him there? Invite him to have something to eat." Moses agreed to live with him, and the man gave him his daughter Zipporah in marriage. Thus Moses, actually an Israelite of the tribe of Levi, who was brought up as an Egyptian, but who must then face his Egyptian home only to meet non-Israelites, one of whom he marries, that is Zipporah. And Zipporah bore him a son, whom he named Gershom, for he said, "I am a stranger in a foreign land." That's in 2:22. In this way, Moses' life in Midian settles down like this. More or less, his family is there. But then the lingering question, will Moses be able to offset the oppression and suppression in Egypt? Will he be accepted as a leader of the Israelites? The Exodus narration is also a lamenting story history. The Egyptians suppressed them, and that pain is expressed as a lamentation. We will break, continue in the next episode.